As a tech recruiter who has been working at 4 different startups since 2019, that is ranging from pre-seed all the way to Series C and D, I'm going to share with you some pros and cons so that you can ultimately decide if working at a startup is the right choice for you. Hey professionals, before I even jump into the pros and cons of working at a startup, if you need a refresher course on what is a startup and the different rounds of financing that startups go into, then check this video out that I'm going to put on the screen somewhere. The first advantage that I want to get into is that when you work at a startup, you're going to get some fancy work perks. One perk that is pretty standard at any startup that you go into is flexible working. If you want some freedom throughout the day to work on your tasks, then a startup could be for you. So if you don't want the classic 9 to 5 life, then I would highly consider working at a startup. There is a caveat with this because even though you don't have a classic 9 to 5 setup, they do expect you to get all your work done. So how you get your work done is completely up to you. I have the flexibility of finishing how late and how early, as long as I'm not missing any important meetings and I get all my work done. A flexible schedule is a wicked work perk, but there are other great benefits to working for a startup. Not only will you be getting a salary and potentially getting some bonuses every quarter or every year, but you could also be entitled to receiving options. And if you receive some stock options and the startup is successful, then the stock options that you receive may actually become very lucrative. I will have to make a separate video around exercising stock options and how stock options work within startups, especially at different stages. I just don't think I've got the time to spend in this video because I want to just make it succinct to the advantages and disadvantages. But if you'd like to see that type of video, then let me know in the comments down below. On top of stock options and that annual bonus or quarterly bonus and a salary, you'll also get other benefits. So as you all know, this is my 4th startup that I've worked at. So let me go through a few benefits that I've had over the past few years. When I worked at Revolut, we had this benefit where every day you'd be able to order Deliveroo and Revolut would pay up to £15 of your order. The only caveat with this, your order can only be delivered at 7 p.m. to the office, which is absolutely fine because we had flexible working schedule. So I'd get in at 10 and I'd leave at 7 anyway, and I'll order my food at 6:30. It comes at 7, I pick it up, and then I just go to my flat. This was actually quite smart on Revolut's side because it would encourage us employees to actually stay in the office longer. Every Friday we'd have cookies as well. That's actually pretty nice. It's a shame that I didn't really use the Deliveroo as much as I could have used it. Let me just show you my phone of all the Deliveroo orders that I received. How mad is this? This is the amount of orders that I actually placed. It was actually such a sick perk. Yeah. So Revolut was pretty sick, and they had other additional perks. You can obviously check out the perks that they have on their website. Revolut was such a great time, and I encourage anyone to actually apply to Revolut because it's actually a really cool company to work at. So most recently, before I was made redundant, I used to work for a company called Page. They are an AI healthcare company. If you saw my life update video, then you'll understand what sort of happened there. But I'll also reference that video towards the end of this video, and a link will be in the description down below. But when I was at Page, I would get sent £100 worth of snacks every month. Granted, this only happened within the first 3 months because it just got too expensive, I think, for the company to just keep supplying these snacks because we were hiring a lot of people then, and I was involved in hiring all those people. But I just found this incredible that every month we had £100 worth of snacks. You can check out my snack videos actually on this channel. I'll put a link in the description and thumbnails on the page where you can find those videos. And another perk that Page offered was unlimited PTO. PTO stands for personal time off, so unlimited annual leave, essentially. Let that sink in. Unlimited holidays you'll be able to take at this company. There is pros and cons with unlimited PTO, and I think I'll have to make a separate video on why this is a good perk and why this is not a good perk. Let me know in the comments down below, would you ever work for a company that offers unlimited holiday? Currently at Luminova, we have a lot of great benefits. My most favorite benefit that we have right now, team retreats. And it's not those typical team retreats that companies put on their website and that you never actually see happen, or they only provide these team retreats to high flyers club, or those are smashing their targets. So I joined Luminova at the end of August, and in September it was a mazza because they flew me to Skopje, which is in Macedonia, to meet my colleagues, and it was basically a people's team retreat for four nights, 5 days, and then after Skopje, they actually flew me direct from Skopje to Munich, where I could meet the founders, go into the office, see the headquarters, and I actually attended Bits and Pretzels, which is the largest startup founders event across Europe. Like, Arnold Schwarzenegger was doing the opening ceremony, and it was just inspiring just hearing him do a talk.
It's impossible. And that's when I learned how not to listen to the naysayers. Because everyone says no, it can't be done.
For me, as a recruiter, just going into a company that's pretty new and they flew me across Europe like twice, I just think that's incredible. Other benefits that I received is I've got 2 monitors here in my room. You can probably see it through some B-roll that I'm going to shoot over, and I also expense like an air purifier. This little bad boy, which is pretty cool. Also got my keyboard, mouse, a lot of other gadgets, hard drives. If you saw my room like 2 years ago compared to what it is now, it's completely different. I absolutely love this monitor as well. It's like ultra wide, curved, 35 inches. It's so sick. It's so sick. First advantage out the way, which is like cool benefits. Second benefit and advantage that you could be gaining working for a startup is the environment just fosters creativity. If you work for a corporate like the Big Four, so PwC for instance, then if you want to implement something within the company, I'm pretty sure you'll have to go through certain protocols and actually get sign off from not just a director but maybe a senior director. There's a lot of arbitrary processes to just get sign off on something. When you work for a startup, if you have an idea and you want to roll with it, you're allowed to have that freedom to just roll with it. And another thing that I've noticed, if you want to change something that's maybe not working for you, it's a lot easier to do that within a startup than within a corporate environment, because they've got policies in place. Where working at a startup, they actually encourage you to challenge the norm and always find ways to be innovative. Another advantage that you could get for working at a startup is exciting career advantages if you get in early. So what that means is you could get promoted very, very quickly when you're working in a startup compared to when you're working within a corporate environment. Let's say you join a startup during its early stage of 50 employees, you'll actually be able to move up that career ladder a lot easier than other companies that have maybe 1,000 employees, 2,000 employees. As startups gain more attention from consumers or investors, that may allow you to actually gain additional responsibilities a lot quicker. So with those additional responsibilities, you will obviously get paid for those additional responsibilities, and you'll get the recognition for completing those additional responsibilities. Let's just quickly talk about recognition, because I think this is super important, and it's something that really resonates with me and why I love working at startups. Because if I work on a task and I execute that task amazingly well, then I'll definitely get the recognition from the founders directly, because I'm working closely with the founders at my current company. Let's say I worked at Barclays and I did an excellent job at hiring someone, and I got the time to hire down, and I found them in a really creative way, or maybe I retained someone within the company. Me getting that recognition from like the directors or upper management is going to be really difficult. It's just going to be my line manager who's going to provide me with that recognition. So I'm the type of person that loves being recognized and loves being rewarded for my work. So working for a startup and making sure that I'm putting in 100% of effort because I want that recognition at the end is one of the reasons why I actually love working at startups. That high visibility, it doesn't go unnoticed. Another advantage of working at a startup is that most startups actually have a flat structure, and it's not going to be like a pyramid. What that means is that there's very little micromanagement that actually occurs within a startup, because within a startup there's so much that you need to just get on and do, and your managers have so much to get on and do that they just don't have time to micromanage you. So they provide you with a lot of trust and encourage you just get on with your work. But don't get this twisted, that doesn't mean my manager doesn't check in and I haven't got a good relationship with my manager. No, at Luminova I have bi-weeklies, like twice a week, where I check in with my manager, and it's actually great because I can talk about blockers that I've had, and I have that 100% feedback loop and transparency within my role. And I actually prefer it because then I'm just not getting micromanaged on a weekly basis of what's happening here, why am I not doing this? And my manager's always there to provide me with support and guidance whenever I need it. I just don't need those daily check-ins. Another advantage for working at a startup is that it's actually pretty impressive on your CV and on your LinkedIn profile if that startup was successful. Okay, that's the caveat. So I've actually experienced this because I had Revolut on my CV, I had Revolut on my LinkedIn profile, being one of those people that put ex-Revolut at the end of my tagline back in the day. Successful startups will do wonders on your resume. As startups are ever changing, you will be forced to wear many hats, especially if there is limited funding. Along with more technical skills, the work environment will actually encourage you to develop your problem solving skills, critical thinking skills, communication skills. These are all essential skills and will enhance your CV, as well as when you actually step into an interview, it will up your interview game. It will provide you with so much ammo to just smash those interviews. There are a few of the pros. I may have possibly missed out on some because all startups, company culture and everything, it's all different, but they're just like the generalized pros that I've seen at the last 4 startups that I've worked at. Before I jump in the cons, please drop a like on the video and do subscribe if you haven't already, because this channel is all about helping you be career savvy at whatever stage you're at in your career. So let's get in these disadvantages. As I mentioned, you'll have a flexible work schedule and you'll have a lot of freedom, but this freedom can actually be a disadvantage because if you can't get all your work done in time, then you'll actually end up working longer hours, and if you can't prioritize your workload, then you could actually get stressed and burnt out quite easily. Working at a startup, you're going to be wearing a lot of hats. You will be working on a lot more responsibilities than probably what your job description said. That's just the nature of it. Especially in the early stages of a startup, you will be required to put in a lot more hours than what you could be doing at a different job. Although I say this, burnout and workplace stress happens near enough at every company, especially in the Big Four. I've seen it myself. The only differences from working at the Big Four and at any other startup is that flexible working environment, which I think is actually pretty good because it's a way to counteract you being stressful, because at the Big Four you're required to do your 9 to 5, but people end up doing overtime anyway. But at least with here we're saying that you don't have to clock in at 9 and you don't have to leave at 5. I just feel like working at a startup, it's a lot more transparency in terms of what you need to get done and the workload that you'll be able to get, compared to those companies that are the Big Four where you may just be swamped with a lot of work. Another disadvantage that you should consider is that you may be getting paid lower than the normal rate of what's going right now for your role and responsibilities and the level of experience that you have. Many startups can't actually pay their employees what they're worth unless they start seeing a significant amount of increase in revenue, growth, users, people using their product and services. So you might actually start on a lower salary. I felt this considering the amount of experience I had and the value I provided. When I was working at Slink, I felt extremely underpaid. I wouldn't even say I felt extremely, I was underpaid. Like, that's the matter of fact. In hindsight, I accepted the role because I knew that I would be employee number 2, and if this company was super successful, then I'll be able to reap all the rewards. Although I did find it weird how they didn't offer me any stock options when I joined, especially being employee number 2, or just didn't really offer any stock options at that point. So if you're planning on joining a startup and they're a bit dodgy about options and all of that, then that could potentially be a red flag. Another disadvantage is more of a personality trait. It could be a disadvantage or it could be an advantage. It just depends on how you look at it. It's an advantage for me, technically, but it could be a disadvantage for you. If you don't like change, then I don't think a startup is right for you. If you're looking for a stable career and a more predictable work-life balance, then I don't think a startup is for you. Change is a regular feature within startups. An example of this change is Luminovo. They were founded at the end of 2017-2018, and they started off as a AI consultancy company. Since the pandemic, they moved away from being an AI consultancy company and into the electronics industry. So if you join that company and you really wanted to gain and develop a lot of AI skills and experience, and they made that change, then obviously that isn't right for you, and you also want to move on to a different company. But if you're happy with sudden changes like that, wherever the founders are taking that company, then it could be an advantage for you. And maybe you're the type of person that likes to be adaptable and just to roll with the punches and is happy with change, like me. At startups, it's common for employees to quickly change their positions, their roles, responsibilities, even their perks and benefits. So as I mentioned before about when I was working at Page and they offered £100 worth of snacks every month. They had that perk for I think 2 months or 3 months, and then they stopped doing that because we just hired too many people, so it was susceptible to change really quickly. Most startups love to reward their employees like catered lunches or happy hours, but if the company is growing, then it just doesn't make financial sense for them to continue with these little work perks. If you're like me and you enjoy change and you find yourself quite adaptable and you don't really mind working within a not so rigid structured process, then startups is definitely for you. Another disadvantage that you may find is that you may have limited resources depending on what stage that startup is. Whilst other companies, like I know Deloitte for instance, they provide training courses that you could gain certain certifications. Sometimes startups won't be able to provide that because they're not in a position where they're making a lot of money where they could offer those training courses. I know when I was working at Page, they offered a stipend, I think it was £750 that I could use to actually take on an additional course or take on a certificate, which I thought was amazing. But there's other companies out there that maybe aren't generating a lot of money that don't provide these type of benefits and perks. An example where I've actually found this, where I've had limited resources, is that when I was in the interview process for Slink, the founders mentioned to me that I would need to provide my own laptop because they just didn't have the need to like buy a laptop for a new employee. I found that was absolutely fine because I was in the process of buying my own laptop, and I was thinking that when the company becomes more successful, then I'll be able to get my own work laptop, don't have to rely on using my own laptop. Something so small about just using your own laptop for work, it just made me realize the importance of actually switching off after work, because not having a work laptop and constantly using my personal laptop obviously in the evenings and on weekends, it actually made me like sort of attract myself to actually checking my emails or doing a little bit of work on the weekends, or maybe opening LinkedIn and start checking my messages and just like reaching out and just like helping candidates over the weekend and outside of my working hours. You need to have a good work-life balance. You really don't want a nasty habit of not knowing how to relax and switch off. There's more to life than obviously your job. Another disadvantage that you can find for working for a startup is lack of structure. Startups often lack structure because leaders and founders can actually blend in within employees. Rather than having a clear hierarchy of power and influence like a corporate company, it's easy to just get confused with who's overseeing what department, company, this particular task, this initiative. It can be all muddled up if there's that flat structure. This could sometimes leave employees unsure with who's responsible for what task. Fortunately, Luminovo, they don't have this problem because they've implemented something called DRIs. DRI stands for Directly Responsible Individual, and we heavily use Notion, so you can see on Notion if there's like a task involved, who is that DRI within that task. So let's say talent acquisition. On the DRI of talent acquisition, so if there's a particular role and I'm the DRI for that role, then anyone within the organization that has any questions regarding that role, they can ask me. I think that's the best way because you're providing a lot of structure with who's in control of what and who's managing certain tasks or initiatives. And finally, the last disadvantage that I want to talk about for working at startups is the lack of job security. I know from the past years, startups can be successful and startups can just fail. Startups are also super susceptible to hiring freezes, the economic crisis. Revolut was to the pandemic that caused a restructure. For this reason, startups can't guarantee job security or stability. As you all know, every single startup that I've worked at, the role was terminated abruptly. Ultimately, the choice of making a startup is yours to make. I could just provide you with the experiences that I've gained over the past few years. Drop a comment if you're currently working at a startup and there's anything that I've missed, or if a startup sounds appealing to you or it's not because the disadvantages are just outweighing the pros. Be sure to subscribe for more content like this, as I've got a lot of videos on the way that covers CV, interview, career advice. Be sure to follow me on IG, Twitter, TikTok and LinkedIn. And peace, I'll see you on the next one.